Hello, children. It's Grandma Carla, and we're starting chapter 16 of Abby Lost at Sea. Luke and Captain Chandler had been gone 4 or 5 minutes when Abby heard a thump on the ceiling above her. Oh, please, don't let them get caught. In her mind's eye, she could see the mutineers discovering them and throwing them overboard. The last thing she wanted was to be stuck on board without Luke. Abby gripped the windowsill and leaned out. She hoped for a glimpse of them up above or on their way back down. Just as she retreated back, something large was lowered in the spot where she'd been. The skiff! Abby wanted to reach out and grab it, get into it, and escape. Anywhere is safer than here. But the boat sailed by her too quickly. She watched as the skiff lowered toward the water. When it hit, the boat made a slight splash. Abby held her breath. Had someone heard it? Tense moments passed. When no cry of alarm was raised, she sighed with relief. The boat trailed behind the ship, tethered by the rope that had lowered it. Abby noted in dismay that it didn't stay right behind the ship, but arched away from the ship. "I hope no one sees it," she said aloud. Then Abby silently urged Luke and the captain, "Hurry, hurry, hurry, come down." She peered out the window into the dark and was shocked to see Luke's tan shirt gliding through the air. He was sailing down the rope that was suspended between the ship and the skiff. When he got to the small boat, Luke pulled himself aboard. Seconds later, Abby saw the triangle of white gliding through the air. It was the captain's cravat. She was alone on the ship with Jackal, and the skiff had disappeared, swallowed up in darkness. Abby grabbed the window frame. "Oh, what am I supposed to do?" Suddenly, a scary voice came out of the night. "Jump, Abby, jump!" It was Luke trying to holler in a whisper. Just then, the rope that tied the skiff to the ship went slack. Captain Chandler had cut the boat's tow line free of the mutineers, leaving Abby at their mercy. Swallowing hard, Abby climbed up on the window seat and pulled one leg through the open window. She realized that the captain and Luke could see her because of the backlight of the cabin's lantern. If she wanted off the ship, she would have to jump into the unknown, into black water as scary as her nightmares, where unseen things waited to rise from the deep and grab her. Abby held the window frame and pulled her other leg through. Her weight now rested on the frame. All she had to do was push off, and she would be free of the ship and free of Jackal. "Oh, God, I am so scared. Help me." She could barely make out the water 20 feet below. A pounding on the cabin door jerked Abby from her misery. "Open the door," Mr. Job cried. She could hear other men with him. Then the most frightening sound of all, a key in the lock. Abby's heart beat so fast she thought it might explode. The door flew open, and Mr. Job with 2 others burst into the room. Abby pushed off and flew through space. When she hit the sea, she went down briefly in the cold water, and then she rose to the surface, sputtering. Her clothes weighed her down. "Luke!" she screamed. "Where's the skiff?" The waves sloshed over her head, but she struck out swimming in the direction she'd last seen the skiff. "Abby, over here!" Luke's voice sounded panicked. Behind her, Abby could tell a lantern was spilling golden light on the waves. Water smacked her in the face. "Someone must be hanging a lantern out of the window. They're searching for me." In the glow of the lantern, the waves lightened to green, and out of the watery deep came a powerful form that shot past her like lightning. Abby's heart almost stopped. Shark! A giant, fast shark! It was so close. She felt the water turbulence as it passed. Panic swamped Abby's mind. She flailed and fought against the sea, trying to catch her breath. Waves seemed intent on dunking her, but she could hear Luke screaming her name. Men from the ship were yelling too. Then she heard a splash, and a moment later, a gunshot. They were shooting at her. A sudden splashing in front of her made her stop swimming. She screamed. Then Luke's hand reached out and grabbed her wrist. There was no time for words. He pulled her toward the skiff, now only yards away. Captain Chandler's strong arms gripped Abby and lifted her in. Luke threw one leg over the gunwale, glancing back over his shoulder. Then he too fell safely in the skiff, sending it dipping in the swells. "Captain, they shot at us." Captain Chandler shook his head. "No, boy. Mr. Job took aim at the shark. I believe he hit it too. Otherwise, one of you might not be here." Abby shivered on the wooden bench. The skiff rocked in the waves as Captain Chandler removed his blue woolen coat and draped it around her. She drew the coat close. "Thank you, Captain, but they know we're here. They'll be after us soon." "We'll know in a few minutes if they're coming," the captain said, "but let's take a moment to thank God for your safe escape from the ship." Luke sat next to Abby. "And the shark," he said quietly. The captain bowed his head, speaking softly to God. Abby closed her eyes, tears squeezing out. She wanted to lie down and sleep and forget all about her problems and fears. Wearily, she leaned against Luke's shoulder and sighed. His arm found its way around her back. When the captain stopped praying, Abby thought she would just keep her eyes closed and rest a while. Then Luke spoke up, hesitantly at first. "I haven't talked to you, God, since Ma died, and I feel bad about that. I'm real sorry. I just want to thank you for keeping Abby safe from that shark. I was sure it was going to get her." The waves rhythmically hit the gunwales of the skiff, but all Abby could hear was Luke's voice cracking with emotion. She opened her eyes and saw Luke's face covered by his one free hand. She let go of the captain's coat and tenderly placed her palm against Luke's cheek. Captain Chandler cleared his throat. "In the meantime, I don't intend to make it easy for those mutineers to get us. Let's hoist our own sail, Luke, and set our course for Oahu." He rose to retrieve the short mast and sail tucked under the benches. "With a little nudge from God, we just might get her pointed in the right direction and make landfall by morning. Right, son?" Luke rose to help. "Aye, sir." Abby gathered the coat tighter about her and closed her eyes. Gratitude swept over her. They were lost at sea again, but this time with an ocean-going captain who knew currents and sailing. As she took a deep breath and opened her eyes, she was struck by the beauty of the night. The stars shone brightly from the rich black canopy, like diamonds in a velvet-lined jewelry case. She remembered how God had told her, "I will watch over you like the ancient stars." The memory of his words soothed her. Luke and Captain Chandler spoke together as they raised the mast and hoisted the sail. She heard Luke point out the ship's lanterns far in the distance as he said, "We're not worth the bother of them turning around." Abby smiled. No doubt Jackal considered himself well rid of the bad luck girl. He didn't want any reminders of God on board. Or perhaps he hadn't awakened yet, and the crew didn't care about them. Abby soon quit listening to Captain Chandler and Luke. Her heart was too full to listen to human words. For the first time in her life, she had heard Luke talk to God, the one in whom she now had a greater trust. The chambers of her heart were ringing like a bell tower, chiming with joy, even in the midst of being lost on the wide sea. Wrapped in the captain's coat, Abby slept off her exhaustion on the wooden bench. When dawn broke, she sat up at the light pouring over a distant mountain. "Land!" she shouted, as if she had just discovered it. Captain Chandler grinned at Luke. "Good thing she's on board, or we might have missed it." He winked, and Luke grinned back at him from his place at the tiller. "Crinoline corsets! I just thought you'd like to know," she said with a harumph. "Don't get a bee in your bonnet, Abby," Luke said. "We're glad you got your beauty sleep. Captain figures we'll be ashore in the next half hour or so. We're on the windward side of the island, so we've had full sails all morning. Hold her steady, Luke," the captain said, "and we'll beach at that distant stretch of land. If I recollect things correctly, that might be Kailua up there." "Why, Kailua is where my uncle's ranch is," Abby said happily. We could see Ma and Pa today. Could happen, the captain agreed. But the whole area is called Kailua, if I'm not mistaken. You say he owns some land around here? Abby rubbed the sleepy seeds from her eyes and spoke enthusiastically. Yes, a whole ranch. I believe he's rich, at least in land. Luke spoke up. Ab, you thirsty? Powerfully thirsty, and a little hungry, too. The captain reached over to the wooden box near Luke and lifted the lid. He took out a tin box and a glass jar full of water. It's not much, but soda crackers and water are better than hunger and thirst. Abby ate gratefully. As the minutes sped by, they sailed over the sea swells. A half-mile from shore, a frolicking school of dolphins greeted them. The joyful animals leapt and twirled from the sea, enjoying themselves as they splashed backward into the water. Small geysers of spray shot up where they re-entered the water. Oh, Luke, aren't they beautiful? Abby cooed. I'd never be afraid to swim in the ocean if I had dolphins with me. The captain smiled. They are wondrous creatures and always a good omen to sailors and Hawaiians. Escorting them toward the beach, the dolphins took turns swimming at the bow of the skiff, diving just ahead of it. When the little boat finally was within 30 yards of the white shore, the dolphins veered off and headed back out to sea. Farewell, Abby called. At least there are no coral reef here, Luke shouted over the sound of crashing waves. Abby remembered their first landing, but this time the boat was tossed into the gently sloping beach. It ran smoothly with the breaking wave before coming to a halt. Luke and Abby leapt out ahead of the captain and helped push the boat onto dry land. In the early morning light, Abby spied a group of women and a cluster of grass huts in the distance. Shall we go ask for directions? She asked. Lead on, Captain Chandler said. As they drew near, they were greeted by a huge Hawaiian woman with long white hair and a beautiful round face. Aloha, Hawaiians. Welcome to Kailua. The islander sat on a grass mat, mending a huge fishing net spread out before her. 3 other large women working on the same net raised friendly faces to them. Delighted, Abby spoke. Aloha, I am Abby, and this is Luke and Captain Chandler. His crew mutinied. We escaped, and now we're looking for my parents. They should be at my uncle's ranch here on Kailua. The woman who had greeted them rose, her hair swinging below her waist. She stood tall, regal, and proud. I am Olani, a chiefess of Kailua. She spoke in a sing-song voice, her face gracious and kind. Little Wahine has much story to say. Come, you refresh to my home. Eat pus, some papaya and fish. Then my son take you for uncle's home. She motioned for the other woman to come with them. Abby's mouth dropped open. You're Alani? When Alani smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkled. Yes, you hear of me? Your son, Kimo, told me about you. He said you have hair like the mountain mist. Abby grew more excited by the minute. Is Kimo here? He up country for his father, hunting. They be back today. You will see him, I think. I'd love to wait for him, Abby said anxiously. But my parents think I'm dead, lost at sea, and we have to leave right away for my uncle's ranch. Do you know where Samuel Kindle lives? Alani put down her wooden mending needle. Yes, but miles from here. Up Pali Mauka toward the mountains. She pointed to the distant mountains southwest of the village. You leave now. You make before sunset. Pack water and food. Abby's face showed her disappointment. Oh, I'd hoped we'd see them soon. Luke spoke up. How's the climb, Miss Olani? Is it rough? Miss Olani, thank you, hey old boy. Have no problem to climb. Miss Olani, thank you, hey old boy. Have no problem to climb up. Abby has good strong legs too? Abby swallowed. Well, if I can rest a lot, I can make it. But I'm already tired. Alani looked at her knowingly. I think you take my horse, Sugar. She climb mountain good. She carry pack too. You little bitty thing. She carry Abby, no problem. Abby brightened. Oh, Alani, thank you so much. Without thinking, she threw her arms around the large chiefess. "Come, old girl." With that, Olani and her large friends smiled blissfully. It seemed to Abby that they did not have a care in the world, and with her help, neither would she. 2 hours later, Abby was riding Sugar while Luke and Captain Chandler walked ahead of her. Though tired from the long night, the three had eaten a delicious breakfast of papaya and fish, as well as coconut, baked breadfruit, and coconut milk. They had been strengthened for their journey, not only by the food, but also by Olani's lilting voice of kindness. After Olani had given them expert directions, Abby, Luke, and Captain Chandler had started their trek up the mountain. "She is truly worthy of her title of chiefess," Captain Chandler said as they marched through a thicket of scrub and kiav. "Such loving kindness, aloha spirit, they call it." He shook his head in seeming amazement. "You won't find that in many other places around the world." "Yep," Luke agreed. "If my Aunt Dagmar had even one little fingerful of aloha, I could have stayed there 4 more years. Abby's mind had moved away from Alani's beach home and the comfort she'd found there. She was looking ahead to a reunion with Ma and Pa and even little Sarah. Tears welled up regularly as she thought about seeing their amazed faces. To them, she'd be back from the grave. "Oh, this will be a happy day," she thought. As the flat land began to arise along with the sun, all talking stopped. Occasionally the travelers stopped to drink deeply from the goatskin bag of water. Abby had long since given back to Captain Chandler his coat, now tied behind Sugar's saddle. No one had noticed the flattened leather scroll inside Abby's dress, but in the heat it was beginning to itch and scratch. Since Sugar walked behind the 2 men, Abby took the opportunity to unbutton her top button and remove the map. But what should I do with it? Her gaze fell on the captain's coat, tied behind Sugar's saddle. She quickly tied the map to the back of Sugar's saddle and covered it with the captain's coat. As they pressed on, low shrubbery gave way to trees, both light and dark green. Captain Chandler gestured toward this pale green leaf tree with large brown nuts. "Abby," he said, turning to look at her, "that is a kukua tree, sometimes called a candle nut. We are about to enter a kukua forest, I think." Luke inclined his head toward a dark green tree from up ahead. "What's that one called, Captain?" "It's known as a koa tree. The 2 trees often grow together at this elevation. They make a pretty contrast to each other, don't you think?" Luke snorted. "I suppose so. That's Abby's interest, drawing trees and birds and such. Personally, I don't pay it much mind." Abby smiled. "You never know when it'll come in handy, knowing about local flora and fauna, Luke." "She's right, boy. A man who knows about his surroundings can master them. For example, the sweet-smelling sandalwood trees that grow on the Hawaiian mountains are worth a fortune right now." The captain paused and shook his head. "And my fortune is on its way to China without me." "Why don't we stop, Captain," Abby said in an effort to cheer him, "and fortify ourselves with the lunch Olani prepared for us?" Luke let out a whoop. "Great idea, Ab." The weary travelers stepped off the beaten track into a shaded grove of kukua trees and opened up the packed basket. They laid out their lunch of fruit, broiled fish, and chicken. 40 minutes later, after a short nap, they were back on the trail again. The sun was strong and hot, but they often moved under clumps of shady forest trees. Not long after lunch, they came upon an outcropping of rocks and a cliff overlooking blue-green Kailua Bay below. Captain Chandler rolled up his white shirt sleeves and raised his face to the trade winds. "I never tire of the sea," he said. "Look at the ship yonder under full sail. She's a beauty." His voice stopped as his eyebrows narrowed. He watched the distant ship intently. Then he cried, "By the saints, that's my ship! It's the Flying Lady returning." Luke came alongside him, shielding the sun from his eyes. "You're right, Captain, but why would they come here after sailing on hours ago?" Abby chewed her lower lip nervously as she dismounted. In a moment, she joined them. I think I know why they've returned." "You?" sputtered the captain. "Well, for heaven's sakes, girl, spill it out." Abby untied the rolled leather map from beneath the saddle and held it up. "I have Jackal's treasure map. It's only a little bit damp." The captain took it from her while Luke whooped, doing a little jig in the dirt near the cliff. "Man alive," he enthused. "You hornswaggled that varmint? What a great trick, Abby." The captain did not look at the map. Instead, he rolled it and handed it back to her. "I hardly think having 20 armed men on our tail is great." Luke pressed on, oblivious to the captain's thoughts. "How'd you ever do it, Ab?" Abby blushed, her cheeks looking like 2 ripe apples. "Well, when Jackal told me that he was going to send you to the bilge, Captain, and tie me to the galley, I knew we would never get a chance to escape, so I smacked him in the head." Luke hooted with pleasure. "What'd you use, Ab?" "I used the pepper shaker." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Captain Chandler broke into a chuckle that turned into a rumbling laugh. Everyone joined in. When the merriment died down, the captain wiped his eyes and said, "Well, I'll be. With the pepper shaker my lovely Isabel brought me, you say. She knows how I love my seasonings. She will be delighted to hear it, Abby." "Then what happened, Abby?" Luke asked. "Well, I took off for the door, but I began to worry that maybe I'd done him in. So I snuck back to see if he was still breathing." "Abby, that was brave." Luke gazed at her with pride. Abby, pleased with the compliment, continued, "That's what I saw the map sticking out of his shirt front, and for some reason, I just took it. Between the whack on the head and all the rum he'd been drinking, he probably didn't wake up until this morning." "Bravo, Abby!" The captain's eyes shone. "Thank the good Lord he got you through it." He stroked his chin, deep in thought. "When he finally came to, I bet Jackal howled in rage. He returned for the map, and when he sees the ship's skiff on the beach, he'll know we're here. But we have the element of surprise on our side." He stared at his distant vessel. "Perhaps we can use it to our advantage." He motioned for Abby and Luke to sit on the rocks beside him. "Let's plan our move. First off, Jackal will come on shore, and he might learn where we're heading. Abby, do you want him to know where your family lives?" "No, sir," Abby said, her voice concerned. "Nor do I," said the captain. "Then here is what we must do. We must return to the beach and ask for Alani's help. Perhaps we can secure some local Kanaka Hawaiian men to help us." Luke's eyebrows raised. "If Jackal and his men come after us, how are they going to know we went back down the mountain?" Abby spoke up, full of enthusiasm. "Oh, we must leave clues through the kukua groves so they will follow them." "Good thinking, Abby." "Yes, we can leave bits of cloth and broken twigs, things like that. By the time they realize we've returned to the beach, we'll be way ahead of them." They hurried off the path and cut through the kukua forest. There they left shreds of cloth hanging from shrubs, plenty of footprints in the dirt, and broken branches to mark their passing. But all the while, Abby had a plan of her own, taking shape in her imagination. That is the end of chapter 16 of Abby Lost at Sea.